What if I told you that scientists once created a perfect world, and it eventually destroyed everything living inside it? No predators, unlimited food, comfortable shelter, plenty of space. In theory, it should have been paradise, but instead, the population collapsed and eventually went extinct. This was the famous Universe 25, conducted by behavioral scientist John B. Calhoun in 1968, and some researchers believe it may contain a warning for humanity. Let's talk about what happened. Imagine a large enclosure designed specifically for mice, food dispensers constantly filled with grain, water always available, clean nesting areas, no disease, no predators, no harsh weather. In other words, a mouse paradise. Calhoun designed the environment to support about 4,000 mice comfortably, but the experiment began with just 8. 4 males, 4 females. At first, everything worked exactly as expected. The mice reproduced quickly. Every few weeks, the population doubled, the colony grew steadily, and life seemed peaceful. But then, something strange began to happen. Around several hundred mice, social behavior started changing. Dominant males began fighting constantly. Some mice were attacked for no clear reason. Mothers sometimes abandoned their young. The society inside the enclosure was becoming unstable, and then another group appeared. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. These mice looked healthy, their fur was perfectly groomed. They had no scars from fighting, but they behaved very differently from the others. They stopped competing for territory, they avoided social interactions, they didn't fight, they didn't defend nests, and most importantly, they stopped mating. Instead, they spent their time eating, sleeping, and grooming themselves. They withdrew from the social structure entirely. At the same time, the rest of the colony became more chaotic. Aggression increased, some mice attacked their own kind, there were even cases of cannibalism. Mothers stopped caring for their babies, young mice grew up without learning normal social behavior. Gradually, reproduction slowed down, fewer and fewer babies were born. Eventually, birth stopped completely, even though food was unlimited, even though space was still available. Even though nothing in the environment had become worse, the population simply stopped reproducing, and over time, the remaining mice grew old and died. The colony eventually reached zero, extinction, all inside what was supposed to be the perfect world. Calhoun called this process a behavioral sink. His idea was that when populations become too dense and social roles break down, normal behavior collapses. Once that collapse begins, recovery may become impossible, even if resources are still abundant. The most haunting part of the experiment came at the end. Some of the surviving mice, especially the beautiful ones, were physically capable of reproducing, but they never tried. It was as if the instinct itself had disappeared. Calhoun believed this experiment might reflect something about complex societies, including humans, not that people would behave exactly like mice, but that social structure, purpose, and meaningful roles might be just as important as food and shelter. Without them, a society might slowly lose its ability to continue. Today, scientists debate how directly these results apply to humans. Human societies are far more complex. Culture, technology, and institutions change the equation, but the experiment still raises uncomfortable questions. What happens when survival becomes too easy? What happens when individuals stop feeling necessary to the system around them? And what happens to a society when fewer and fewer people want to create the next generation? The enclosure in Universe 25 still had food, still had water, still had safety, but it no longer had a functioning society, and without that, the population faded away, which brings us to the question many people still ask today. Was Universe 25 simply a strange mouse experiment, or was it a warning about what can happen when a society loses its balance? So let me ask you something. Do you think something like this could ever happen to humans? Or are we too different from mice for that comparison to matter? Let me know what you think.